Hello everyone, welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we dive into some of the most disturbing and unexplained cases ever to cross a police desk. These are not legends or internet tales, but documented incidents, pulled from dispatch recordings, case files, and the testimonies of officers who never forgot what they saw. Across the United States, countless small-town police departments patrol endless stretches of forgotten roads. Lonely highways cutting through mist-covered mountains, shuttered mining towns, and wooded valleys where radio signals die and help never comes. It's in these quiet, lawless spaces where some of the most chilling reports have emerged. Encounters that defy training, logic, and explanation. What you're about to hear are 7 real accounts, compiled from field reports, archived transmissions, and interviews with officers whose stories were never meant to reach the public. Now, settle in and prepare yourself as we uncover the darkness that dwells in 7 true most disturbing police horror stories. On the cold, mist-choked night of October 3rd, 2012, dispatchers at the Carter County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina received a 911 call that lasted only 17 seconds. The caller never spoke. The line carried nothing but ragged breathing and the sound of something wooden creaking, like a door slowly moving in the wind before it was swallowed by static. The call traced to an isolated property registered to Robert Klein, a 61-year-old retired logger who lived alone in a remote stretch of the Blue Ridge Mountains, roughly 12 miles from the nearest town. Deputy Mark Denson, a 14-year veteran known for his calm under pressure, was dispatched to investigate at 11:42 p.m. He logged his route on the in-car computer, noting heavy fog, poor visibility, no traffic. The road wound steeply upward, with pine branches scraping against the patrol car as he climbed into the mountains. Radio contact was lost 2 miles before the cabin. His last transmission came at 12:07 a.m., recorded on the cruiser dash mic. Arriving at the Klein residence, no visible lights. Attempting contact, that was the final message ever heard from Deputy Denson until 3 hours later, when backup arrived. When Deputy Alan Brewer and Reserve Officer Tina Morales reached the site around 2:28 a.m., Denson's cruiser was still idling at the base of the slope, its driver's door ajar and radio completely dead. The surrounding fog had thickened, muffling every sound except the low hum of the engine. Brewer called out, but the only response was the echo of his own voice against the trees. The Klein cabin sat 50 yards uphill, its porch light flickering as if connected to an unstable generator. The door was unlocked. Inside, the scene looked more like a struggle than a normal disturbance. A coffee mug lay shattered on the floor, its contents dried into a dark stain. Kitchen drawers were half open. Chairs had been knocked over, and a single boot print, Denson's, was visible in the dust by the entryway. The air carried an iron scent, faintly metallic. Morales described it in her report as the smell of old blood. On the kitchen table sat a kettle, still warm to the touch. The back door, however, told the strangest story. The frame splintered outward, not inward, as if someone had broken out of the house, not into it. Behind the cabin, Brewer discovered 2 distinct sets of tracks leading into the forest. One from Denson's standard-issue boots, and another from bare feet, smaller, uneven, and deep in the mud, as though whoever made them had been running or limping. Both trails vanished into the fog-shrouded pines that blanketed the ridge. The officers followed the tracks for nearly a quarter mile, their flashlights barely cutting through the dense mist. Morales later wrote that she heard a distant whistling sound, slow, tuneless, and eerily human, though she couldn't determine the direction. Moments later, a gunshot cracked through the woods. Brewer sprinted ahead toward the echo, calling Denson's name, but there was no reply. They soon found Denson's Glock 22 lying in the mud, slide locked open, magazine missing. Nearby was his flashlight, its lens shattered, still faintly glowing. The ground bore signs of struggle, broken branches, deep boot impressions, and disturbed soil consistent with dragging. Brewer radioed in a partial message before the signal cut. Found his weapon. Looks bad out here. Possible 10-, then the transmission ended abruptly with static. By dawn, Carter County Search and Rescue had arrived, along with state investigators from Boone. The fog still lingered low over the trees, making aerial sweeps impossible. Teams were deployed on foot, marking trees with reflective tape and GPS tracking. They found the first sign of Deputy Denson around 7:40 a.m. His patrol hat, half buried in mud near a creek bed roughly half a mile east of the cabin. The creek had been disturbed, ripples breaking the reflection of the trees above, though there was no wind. Officer Morales noticed faint drag marks continuing downstream, vanishing where the water deepened. Then, about 10 feet away, they found a bloodied handprint on a rock. Forensics later confirmed it matched Denson's right hand. Sheriff Lyle Patterson ordered a full-scale search through the adjacent ridge, describing the scene as beyond strange. Even trained K-9 units hesitated to proceed beyond a certain point in the forest. Ears pinned back, growling at nothing visible. That same morning, a local logger claimed he'd seen a light moving in the trees near his property around midnight, not a flashlight, but something dim, orange, and hovering low to the ground. Later that day, technicians recovered footage from the dash cam inside Denson's cruiser. The timestamp showed 12:06 a.m. to 12:14 a.m., just before the signal went dead. The first few minutes appeared routine. Denson exiting the vehicle, flashlight in hand, approaching the cabin through fog. His radio crackled faintly in the background. At 12:09 a.m., the footage glitched. The image distorted into horizontal lines, and for 2 full seconds, the audio spiked. A loud metallic hum followed by 3 slow knocks, seemingly from inside the cruiser itself. Then, the final clear frame. Denson standing still beside the cabin porch, turning toward the tree line as though responding to a sound. Behind him, at the edge of the frame, something faintly visible. A human shape, hunched, standing motionless among the trees. The last moment before the feed cut out showed Denson's flashlight dropping to the ground. After that, the video froze on static. The technicians confirmed no tampering. The footage ended exactly when his radio signal dropped. The report concluded. We cannot identify the figure due to distortion. Sheriff Patterson initially suspected foul play. Possibly Klein, the reclusive homeowner, lashing out in paranoia. But as the hours turned to days, the theory began to collapse. There was no trace of Klein anywhere. His truck remained parked behind the cabin, keys inside, and a week's worth of groceries untouched. Detectives uncovered something else. Klein had called the sheriff's office 2 nights prior, leaving a voicemail that was never properly logged. In it, he sounded terrified. There's something coming down from the ridge at night, he said, voice trembling. It's not an animal. I've seen it watching me through the window. That voicemail was time-stamped October 1st, 10:14 p.m. The team analyzed the cabin again, this time using thermal imaging. They found cold spots around the back entrance, unexplainable temperature drops of nearly 20 degrees in circular patterns, like something had been standing there for a long time. Patterson later admitted off-record, it wasn't any suspect I'd ever dealt with. The woods felt wrong. Even the air felt heavy. 2 days later, a local fisherman reported finding a plastic evidence bag snagged in roots along the same creek where Denson's hat was recovered. Inside was a small cassette tape, labeled only with the number 12. The tape was badly water damaged, but partially playable. The recovered audio contained only environmental sounds for the first 3 minutes: wind, water, and faint footsteps. Then came Denson's voice, whispering, "I can see lights moving." No radio contact. Think it's Klein, but he's not answering. A pause followed, then a low rhythmic sound, 2 knocks, a gap, then 3. It repeated several times, closer each time, until Denson's breathing quickened. "It's right behind the trees. Oh God." The tape cut to static. Analysts confirmed the recording matched Denson's voice, but the background frequency contained an unexplained subharmonic, a low vibration beneath human hearing range. The sheriff sealed the tape as evidence. It was never released publicly. On the 5th day of the search, a team located something deep within the Blue Ridge woods, a makeshift clearing surrounded by dead pines, their bark stripped bare. In the center lay an old fire pit, cold but recently disturbed. Next to it was Denson's missing magazine, neatly placed on a flat stone. Nearby, pinned to a tree with a knife, was a sheet of paper from Klein's notebook. On it were scrawled words written in erratic, jagged handwriting. "It knows when we look." No other remains were found. Not a drop of fresh blood, no drag marks, no clothing. The soil beneath the pit, however, was unusually soft. When probed, searchers found compacted ash mixed with fragments of melted plastic and small, unidentifiable bone shards. The FBI lab later concluded the bone material was consistent with human origin, but too degraded for DNA confirmation. The site was sealed and marked as a hazardous area. Local loggers now refuse to work within 5 miles of that ridge. The Blue Ridge incident officially remains unsolved. Both Robert Klein and Deputy Mark Denson were declared missing, presumed deceased. Their families received folded flags, but no answers. The sheriff's office sealed the cabin shortly after, and the property was auctioned 6 months later, though no one ever claimed it. In 2014, a park ranger stationed 15 miles north reported finding a badge fragment half buried in a landslide zone. The numbers, faint but legible, matched Denson's ID. It looked as if it had been exposed to extreme heat. Officers who worked the original case still refused to discuss it publicly. Morales retired early, citing recurring nightmares. Sheriff Patterson moved out of state. Locals now refer to that stretch of the mountain as Dead Ridge. They say sometimes, in deep fog, you can still hear a single radio click, followed by 3 slow knocks echoing from somewhere inside the forest. The Blue Ridge incident stands as one of the most disturbing unsolved law enforcement disappearances in the southeastern United States. The evidence, fragmented, eerie, and contradictory, never pointed toward a single human suspect. Every official explanation felt incomplete. What unsettled investigators most was the pattern. The call, the distorted video, the strange light reports, all followed the same timeline, as if choreographed. Whatever happened in those woods was deliberate, calculated. The original 9/11 tape remains sealed, but internal sources claim it contains an additional 4 seconds never released to the public. In that segment, before the line cuts out, a faint male voice whispers a single phrase: "Don't let it see you." Neither Robert Klein nor Deputy Denson was ever found. And to this day, no one patrols that ridge alone after dark. On the night of June 11, 2018, State Trooper Evan Holt began his usual patrol along Highway 16. a desolate stretch of asphalt running through rural Washington state. Locals called it the Ghost Highway, a two-lane route cutting through miles of old logging land and misty valleys where cell reception vanished completely. At 11:47 p.m., Holt initiated a routine traffic stop on a gray 2005 Honda Civic that had drifted over the center line multiple times. The stop was recorded through his body camera, later recovered from the scene. For the first few minutes, everything appeared normal. The driver, an adult male in his 30s, handed over registration and license with visible tremors in his hands. Holt's voice remained calm, procedural. But then, as Holt began returning to his cruiser, the man stepped out of the car, looked toward the tree line, and whispered, "It's following me again." Holt, confused, instructed the man to return to his vehicle. The driver hesitated, staring into the darkness beyond the shoulder. The footage caught faint movement behind the trees, something shifting in the shadows, low and fast. Seconds later, the man bolted into the woods. Trooper Holt radioed dispatch. Suspect fled on foot, entering the tree line northbound. Requesting backup. Possible mental breakdown. He followed with his flashlight and body cam still recording. The beam cut through thick cedar trees, catching glimpses of wet foliage and scattered litter. In the footage, Holt's breathing quickened. He called out multiple times for the man to stop, but there was only silence. Then, a rustling sound that grew louder, closer. The camera's audio picked up something unusual. Two sets of movement, Holt's own footsteps, and something heavier pacing parallel to him, just out of sight. After 2 minutes, Holt found a torn piece of clothing, the driver's denim jacket sleeve, snagged on a branch about 6 feet off the ground. It looked shredded, not ripped. He muttered under his breath, "Jesus, how?" before freezing at the sound of a faint voice ahead. The footage captured a man whispering, "Please, just go back," followed by a low guttural growl that silenced everything. Then the body cam glitched for 0.8 seconds. At 12:08 a.m., backup units Deputy Lewis and Sergeant Calloway arrived at the location, finding Holt's cruiser still idling by the roadside. The radio emitted faint static and partial words from Holt's last transmission. They followed his GPS tracker signal about 300 yards into the woods before locating his flashlight and lying on the ground. Lens cracked, beam facing upward into the mist. They called out repeatedly, their voices muffled by the damp night air. Then they found something else, a set of bare footprints deep in the mud, overlapping Holt's boot prints. The spacing was wide, unnatural, as if whoever made them had been moving on all fours. Sergeant Calloway radioed dispatch again, voice tense. "We've got possible animal attack. But these tracks are wrong. Human-shaped." The two officers ventured deeper until the trail simply ended, not faded, but stopped abruptly at a fallen tree. No signs of struggle, no drag marks. Just silence. When they replayed the dash cam later, the cruiser's headlights flickered exactly when Holt's signal vanished. At 6:40 a.m., as daylight broke through the fog, search teams found Trooper Holt's body camera submerged in a shallow stream less than a mile from the road. It was still recording when recovered, battery nearly drained. The first 30 minutes showed the earlier pursuit through the forest. Then, at 12:11 a.m., Holt's camera tilted violently, as if he'd fallen. For a moment, the lens faced the canopy, capturing branches swaying gently. Then came movement, something large passing directly in front of the camera, blocking all light. Investigators later described it only as a dark mass. It emitted no sound, no identifiable shape. A few frames showed brief flashes of reflective eyes low to the ground. Then, a distinct human voice whispered close to the microphone. "He's mine." After that, silence. The final timestamp read 12:14 a.m. Technicians who reviewed the file noted heavy distortion, but no signs of editing. Holt's remains were never found. Authorities later identified the missing driver as Caleb Morris, age 33, resident of Tacoma. His record showed no criminal history, but his family described months of paranoid behavior before his disappearance. According to his sister, Caleb believed he was being stalked by a figure in the woods that followed his car each night. A search of his abandoned Honda Civic revealed a torn notebook in the glove box. On one page, written repeatedly in shaky handwriting, were the words, "It watches from the ditch." Another entry dated 3 days before the incident read, "Can't keep driving. It knows when I stop." The notes ended abruptly. Detectives cross-referenced this with older reports from the same stretch of Highway 16. 5 previous disappearances dating back to 2009, all occurring within a 2-mile radius. In every case, victims had described something following from the tree line. A trucker named Daniel Harper came forward 3 days later, claiming he'd seen Holt's cruiser that night. He was driving westbound when he noticed the police lights stationary by the roadside. As he slowed, his dashcam captured something faint. A tall shape crouched beside the cruiser for less than a second before the feed glitched. When investigators enhanced the footage, the figure appeared pale, elongated, and almost translucent. Its limbs bent wrong, like an animal attempting to stand upright. Harper insisted it wasn't a person. Whatever that was, it looked back at my truck. Eyes reflected white, not red, like glass. The footage was quietly sealed by the Washington State Patrol. No public release followed, though insiders later confirmed the clip's authenticity. Harper refused further interviews. Within months, he quit his job and moved out of state. His final statement read, "There's something living out there on that highway. I don't care if no one believes me." For 3 weeks, law enforcement combed the area around Highway 16. Helicopters, dogs, and thermal drones were used. Nothing. No trace of Holt or Morris. However, several officers reported malfunctioning equipment. Radios cutting out, batteries draining instantly, GPS trackers looping coordinates in circles. Dispatch logs recorded multiple instances of false calls during the search. Voices claiming to be Holt came through static, saying things like, "Still in pursuit, can't see the road." The recordings were traced back to empty frequencies, no transmission source. A communications technician later described it as an impossible echo, like a signal coming from nowhere. When the search finally ended, the official statement cited environmental hazards and poor terrain visibility. Unofficially, half the officers refused to return for the final sweep. Weeks later, a forensic technician attempting to clean up Holt's corrupted body cam audio discovered a hidden file, a brief clip embedded within the damaged data. The timestamp matched 12:13 a.m., right before the recording ended. The clip contained 12 seconds of faint breathing, followed by Holt's voice whispering, almost pleading, "It's wearing his face." Then came the unmistakable sound of metal scraping on asphalt, like a car door dragging. When enhanced spectrally, analysts detected a second overlapping voice repeating Holt's final words, only lower, slower, distorted. The technician who uncovered the file resigned shortly after, citing psychological distress. The file was later sealed by the Department of Public Safety. 6 months later, in December 2018, a landslide exposed a section of forest off Highway 16. Buried beneath dirt and roots, searchers found Holt's police cruiser, mostly intact, doors locked, headlights shattered. The vehicle showed no sign of impact. It had simply been abandoned and buried over time. Inside, they found Holt's service belt neatly folded on the passenger seat. On the windshield, written in dried mud from the inside, were 5 words: "Turn your lights off now." The key was still in the ignition. The radio, when tested, emitted a faint continuous signal at 29 megahertz, a frequency no longer used by the patrol system. When connected to a monitor, it played faint breathing and intermittent whispers of highway noise, looping endlessly. The cruiser was transported to an evidence facility, but within days, every electronic system inside had failed. The Highway 16 body cam case remains one of Washington's most perplexing law enforcement disappearances. No trace of Holt or Morris was ever recovered. The incident prompted new patrol policies. Officers now travel in pairs on Highway 16 after sunset. Unofficially, officers who drive that route claim that radio channels still occasionally pick up Holt's last transmission. Suspect fled on foot before dissolving into static. Truckers avoid the area entirely, saying headlights flicker and GPS systems reroute automatically through detours that don't exist on maps. Locals have stopped calling it Highway 16. They call it the Mirror Road, for the stories of drivers seeing their own reflections walking beside their cars in the dark. No official explanation was ever given. Some blame fog, others blame exhaustion. But those who've listened to Holt's body cam footage in the archives all agree on one thing. Near the end, right before the static, there's laughter. Not human, and very, very close. On March 18th, 2009, Officer Daniel Ruiz, age 32, began his usual midnight patrol in Hollow Creek, a quiet rural town in Kentucky known for its thick woodlands and long-abandoned mining routes. At 12:07 a.m., he checked in from Route 62, reporting low visibility, thick fog, and no traffic. Hollow Creek's police force was small, just 6 officers, and most nights passed without incident. But at 12:49 a.m., Ruiz's dash cam captured something strange. While driving past the old Harrison Mine Road, a pale figure briefly appeared at the edge of the forest, illuminated by his headlights. Ruiz stopped, assuming it was a lost hiker. He radioed dispatch. Possible pedestrian. No reflective gear, standing near the tree line. The figure didn't move. When Ruiz approached with his spotlight, it vanished, not walked away, not ran. Just gone. He made a note in his logbook and resumed patrol. That was the last normal entry. At 1:22 a.m., dispatch received a short transmission from Ruiz's unit. The message was garbled, mostly static, but 2 words were clear. It's moving. When dispatch tried to respond, there was silence. Backup was sent from the Hollow Creek substation, but it would take them nearly 30 minutes to reach the location due to the winding, unpaved roads. Meanwhile, Ruiz's cruiser remained idling near Harrison Mine Road. The dash cam, still recording, showed him stepping out of the vehicle holding a flashlight and drawing his service pistol. The camera caught faint breathing and distant rustling. Then the beam of light jerking violently before cutting to black. When the backup unit arrived at 1:56 a.m., the cruiser's door was open, engine running, and radio hissing with dead static. Officer Ruiz was gone. At dawn, the Kentucky State Police initiated a full search of the Hollow Creek woods. Drones, dogs, and volunteer rangers scoured the 6-mile radius around Harrison Mine Road. Search teams found Ruiz's flashlight 200 yards from the cruiser, its lens shattered, and his sidearm 30 feet further down the slope, every bullet still accounted for. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks leading in or out. Investigators noted how the ground, though muddy, showed no disturbance beyond Ruiz's own footprints. It was as if he had stepped into the forest and vanished into thin air. By afternoon, the fog returned, denser than before, forcing the search to halt. One officer described it as unnatural, like walking into milk. The case was classified as a missing officer under suspicious circumstances. But what they found the next day turned it into something else entirely. When the cruiser's dash cam footage was recovered, forensic technicians discovered something unexpected. Between 1:15 and 1:22 a.m., audio captured faint whispering. Not Ruiz's voice, but multiple overlapping tones, repeating fragments of words. Down there, no light, help. Spectrographic analysis showed the sounds didn't match human vocal range patterns, more like layered frequencies or mechanical distortion. Investigators initially assumed interference from local radio towers, but none operated within a 10-mile radius. The last frame before the video cut out showed Ruiz's flashlight beam pointed toward a hollow pit near the roadside. The same pit miners once used for ventilation shafts in the 1930s. That shaft had been sealed for decades, but after the footage surfaced, it was reopened for inspection. On March 20th, a specialized recovery team entered the old Harrison ventilation shaft using ground-penetrating radar. The tunnel extended far deeper than records indicated, nearly 300 feet before branching into several collapsed corridors. Inside, they found scraps of fabric matching Ruiz's uniform snagged on an exposed nail and deep scratch marks etched into the stone, roughly at shoulder height. The air was heavy with decay. About 100 feet down, one rescuer reported hearing what sounded like a man's voice echoing faintly, repeating the word help over and over. But when they checked the comms, no one on the surface had spoken. The search was called off due to structural instability. No body was recovered. 3 days later, Ruiz's body cam was found 50 yards from the mine entrance, half buried in the mud. The footage was mostly corrupted, but the audio captured a clear sequence. Ruiz breathing heavily, saying, "There's something in here," followed by rapid footsteps, then silence. At the very end, a low humming sound, rhythmic, pulsing, similar to a generator or engine, but coming from deep underground. When investigators enhanced the final seconds, a faint male voice was heard whispering behind him. He shouldn't have come back. No known forensic manipulation could explain the secondary voice. Historical records from Hollow Creek revealed disturbing context. Between 1934 and 1938, the Harrison mine closed after a series of cave-ins reportedly caused by structural failures. But an archived letter from a foreman described something stranger. Workers refusing to enter the lower tunnels after hearing voices that mimicked them from the dark. Local folklore spoke of the Echo Men, entities said to dwell underground, repeating sounds of those who entered. Few took it seriously, until Ruiz's disappearance. When investigators reopened those archives, they discovered one final entry, dated March 19th, 1938. Exactly 71 years to the day before Ruiz vanished. 2 weeks later, volunteer officer Ben Atkins went missing while patrolling the same sector. His cruiser was found less than half a mile from the mine road, engine off, keys still inside, driver's door ajar. No radio contact, no signs of struggle. When forensic teams reviewed his dash cam, they found only one frame of interest. A split-second shot showing what appeared to be a face reflected in the cruiser's side mirror. Ruiz's face, eyes wide, mouth open, lit by the red emergency lights. That frame has been authenticated. No manipulation detected. By April, Hollow Creek was practically deserted. Half the police force requested transfers, others simply resigned. The mine road was officially closed and the shaft resealed with concrete. Unofficially, however, locals claim that on foggy nights, the sound of police radios can still be heard echoing from the forest. Brief bursts of static followed by a man whispering, "Stay away from the light." The Kentucky State Police listed the Hollow Creek incidents as unresolved disappearances under active review. No remains of either officer have ever been recovered. In the years since, the story of Hollow Creek has become an unofficial warning in police training circles. A cautionary tale about isolation, exhaustion, and the dangers of letting curiosity override caution. But among retired officers, there's a quiet belief that Ruiz didn't just disappear. He was taken, claimed by something that watches from beneath, mimicking the sounds of the living until they answer back. As one former investigator summarized in his final report, "Whatever's down there doesn't want to be found. It just wants to be heard." On January 11th, 2016, Officer Carla Myers of the Arizona State Police was dispatched to investigate a welfare call at the Desert Palms Motel, located just off Interstate 17, a crumbling roadside stop long past its prime. A traveler from Oregon had reported strange noises coming from one of the rooms during the night. Loud thumping, then silence. When he looked the next morning, the curtains were drawn tight, and a faint, flickering light glowed inside. The Desert Palms had been nearly empty for years. Only 2 guests were checked in that night. Room 12, the one in question, was supposed to be vacant. At 2:14 a.m., Myers arrived on scene. Her dash cam captured the long stretch of highway bathed in moonlight, the neon motel sign flickering erratically, and a windstorm kicking sand across the asphalt. She reported seeing movement behind one of the windows, a silhouette pacing back and forth. When she knocked on the door of room 12, the movement stopped. No one answered, but the flickering light inside continued. Officer Myers called for backup before attempting entry. While waiting, she circled the building, shining her flashlight into each window. Most rooms were stripped and abandoned, cracked walls, peeling wallpaper, empty beds. When she returned to room 12, the door was slightly ajar. Her body cam recorded her whisper, "Dispatch, be advised, doors open." "I didn't touch it." She slowly pushed it wider. The television inside flickered on static. On the bed lay an open notebook, its pages covered in smeared ink and what looked like dried blood. The bathroom light was on, the door closed. She announced herself, "State Police. If someone's in there, make yourself known." No response. Then, a sudden burst of static from her radio, loud, piercing, and a voice whispered faintly through the noise, "Don't look." The recording ended there for 11 full seconds. A blackout. Backup arrived at 2:39 a.m. Officers Delgado and Hartman found Myers' cruiser parked with the engine running, driver's door open, and her radio still active. They entered room 12 cautiously. The bathroom door was now wide open. Inside, the sink faucet was dripping steadily. Steam fogged the mirror, yet the water was cold. Across the mirror, written in condensation, were the words, "She saw me." There was no sign of Officer Myers. Her flashlight was found on the floor, still on, beam aimed directly at the bathtub, which was dry but faintly stained reddish-brown. Delgado noted a strong smell of ozone, like burned wiring, though no source was found. The motel manager insisted the room had been locked for months and that the key hadn't left the front desk. But when they checked the register, it showed someone had signed into room 12 that very night. The name on the ledger, C. Myers. Forensic analysts later examined the motel's sign-in ledger. The handwriting in C. Myers matched Officer Myers' signature exactly. Pressure, stroke, and pen type. But the ink used was over 2 decades old, according to lab results. The motel owner, Earl Jennings, claimed that years ago, another incident occurred in the same room. In 1995, a woman named Clara Myers, nearly the same name, had vanished from room 12 under identical circumstances. Police never solved that case. When investigators reviewed local archives, they discovered that Clara had been a traveling nurse. She had checked into the Desert Palms Motel on January 11th, the exact same date, 21 years earlier. The eerie coincidence unsettled the entire department. And when the surveillance footage from the motel lobby was recovered, something else surfaced. A brief clip showing Officer Myers entering the lobby, alone. But behind her, reflected in the lobby glass, was another figure walking just a few steps behind. A week later, investigators found an old VHS tape inside the motel's utility room labeled simply, Room 12, 1995. The footage was grainy, showing a woman, later confirmed as Clara Myers, pacing the motel room, appearing agitated. She kept glancing toward the bathroom door, whispering, "Please stop knocking." Near the end of the recording, she sat on the bed, clutching the phone receiver to her ear, but no sound came through. She dropped the phone, turned toward the camera, and mouthed something before the tape cut to static. Lip readers later confirmed her final words. "It's in the mirror." When that segment was played back for Officer Myers' mother during questioning, she fainted. Clara's face, though filmed in 1995, looked almost identical to her daughter's. Same features, same scar above the left brow. The motel's only remaining employee, Greg Fulton, was brought in for questioning. He admitted seeing Officer Myers enter room 12 that night, but claimed she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, tall, wearing a dark jacket. But when I checked the cameras later, he wasn't there. He went on to describe hearing a woman's voice through the motel intercom system hours later, though the system had been disconnected years ago. The voice, he said, was calm, repeating one phrase, "Check the bathroom." Fulton refused to go near the building afterward. 2 days later, he quit his job and moved out of state. By February, the Arizona Department of Public Safety took over the case. Special investigators conducted a ground sweep of the property. Thermal imaging revealed an unmarked crawl space directly beneath room 12. Inside were old wiring panels, discarded furniture, and something else. A wall lined with mirrors. Most were shattered, some covered with fingerprints from the inside. Among the debris lay a broken motel key marked 12, smeared with dust and human oil residue. DNA analysis confirmed a match to Officer Carla Myers. No explanation could account for how her DNA was found beneath the floor when the crawl space was sealed off decades earlier. Weeks after the motel was officially condemned, a final piece of evidence emerged. A highway patrol camera positioned a mile from Desert Palms captured a blurry figure walking along the shoulder at 3:11 a.m., the same night Myers disappeared. The figure was female, barefoot, and wearing a torn police uniform. But the timestamp showed something impossible. The footage was dated January 11th, 1995. Technicians confirmed the camera system had no stored historical footage prior to 2010. To this day, no explanation has been found for the 21-year discrepancy. On March 2nd, 2016, the Desert Palms Motel mysteriously caught fire during the night. The blaze consumed the entire structure within minutes. No accelerant was found. Witnesses claimed to see the flames start from inside the walls. During the cleanup, investigators found melted remnants of bathroom mirrors fused into the tile, reflecting distorted shapes resembling human faces. The official report listed the cause as electrical fault, but the local fire chief, speaking off record, said something else. When we got close, we heard screaming, but not from the fire. From under the floor, to this day, neither Officer Carla Myers nor the 1995 victim Clara Myers has been located. The motel remains a blackened ruin off Interstate 17, fenced off and forgotten. Locals say that if you drive past it on January nights, your radio may cut out, replaced by faint static and a woman's voice whispering through the white noise. Check the bathroom. The Desert Palms Motel has never been rebuilt. The land, now state-owned, remains barren. But late at night, the reflection of its old neon sign is still seen flickering in the dust, even though the sign itself was destroyed long ago. The rain poured relentlessly as Eleanor gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Route 19 was supposed to be a shortcut through the Appalachian backwoods, but the farther she drove, the more the GPS flickered, until the screen went black. The sound of static filled her car radio even though it was turned off. Her headlights sliced through the mist, revealing only wet asphalt and trees leaning over like silent watchers. Then, through the downpour, she saw it. A tall church steeple, cracked and half swallowed by vines. It seemed to loom closer with every mile, even though she hadn't turned off the main road. When she finally slowed to a crawl, she realized her car was the only thing moving. The rain stopped suddenly. The world fell silent. No crickets, no thunder, just that rotting wooden church in the distance, and a rusted iron gate swinging slowly as if welcoming her in. A sign barely hanging from one chain read, "Holy Mercy Baptist, closed since 1968. Her heart thudded as she whispered, "How is it still standing?" But something, maybe instinct, kept her from reversing. She felt as though someone inside already knew she'd arrived. Eleanor pushed through the gate, the hinges screaming in protest. The yard was littered with broken gravestones and wooden crosses half swallowed by moss. The church windows were shattered, but faint light flickered inside like candle flames moving behind the stained glass. She called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Her voice was devoured by the damp air. Then, from inside, she heard a low hum, a hymn. The tune was soft, cracked, as if sung by an old choir in a forgotten language. Her heart raced. Against every rational thought, she stepped up the stairs. The heavy wooden door creaked open to reveal long pews covered in dust and cobwebs. Candles burned at the altar, their flames barely swaying. A huge wooden crucifix hung above, but the figure of Christ was missing. Only the nails remained. She took one step forward. The hymn grew louder, echoing from below the church. Eleanor froze. Beneath her feet she heard movement, slow, dragging footsteps on old wood. Then a voice whispered, "You're late." She spun around, but the pews were empty. The whisper still echoed when Eleanor noticed a section of the floorboards near the altar was loose. Kneeling down, she brushed aside the dust and pried one open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The flickering candles seemed to bend toward the hole, as though drawn by a draft from below. She hesitated, but her phone showed a weak bar of signal, enough to record. She turned on the flashlight and began descending. The air grew colder with each step. The walls were carved from stone, lined with rusty lanterns and strange symbols. Halfway down, she found old hymn sheets pinned to the wall, each page smeared with crimson stains. The deeper she went, the louder the whispering became, now a blend of multiple voices chanting in unison. At the bottom, she entered a narrow tunnel that opened into a catacomb-like chamber. Dozens of pews faced a small altar draped in black cloth. Behind it stood a tall figure wearing a tattered priest's robe, its head tilted downward. "It didn't move," Eleanor whispered. "Father?" The figure raised its hand slowly and pointed directly at her. Eleanor froze in place. The figure at the altar didn't move again, yet the shadows around it seemed to shift and breathe. Her flashlight trembled as she raised it toward the hooded priest. That's when she saw it. The eyes. Two hollow sockets stared back, but within them, faint amber light glowed like dying embers. The priest's jaw cracked open, releasing a single distorted phrase. "Do you still hear the hymns?" Eleanor stumbled backward, her breath fogging the air. The sound of rustling filled the chamber, not footsteps, but the dragging of many feet. She turned the light toward the pews, and what she saw sent her heart into freefall. Rows of uniformed police officers, faces pale and blank, sitting motionless. Their badges were rusted, and their skin looked embalmed. The first row bore name tags reading Carter, Monroe, Lewis, all names she recognized from an old missing persons report she'd covered years ago. The chanting resumed, louder now, echoing from every direction. The preacher slowly raised his hand toward the altar cross. A guttural hum filled the air, and one by one, the candles snuffed themselves out. Only the preacher's glowing eyes remained, watching her. Her instincts screamed to run, but Eleanor's journalistic training took over. She grabbed her phone and began recording, whispering a timestamp. October 12th, 2022. Route 19 church basement. Unknown figures present. The flashlight flickered violently, and the video showed static bars dancing across the screen. When the light steadied, the pews were empty. Heart pounding, she checked the footage. But what appeared on screen made her blood run cold. The video displayed not her, but an older recording. The date read June 14th, 1993. In the frame stood a different person, a sheriff's deputy holding the same phone, trembling. Behind him, the same priest figure moved closer, frame by frame. The screen glitched again, then froze on a single image. The deputy's terrified face as something unseen dragged him backward into the dark. The phone slipped from Eleanor's hands. She backed away, shaking. Somewhere behind her, a voice whispered. He recorded too. The basement began to tremble, dust falling from the ceiling as if something massive stirred beneath the floorboards. She ran toward the staircase, but the steps were gone. Replaced by solid stone, Eleanor pressed her back to the cold wall, scanning the room for any way out. Suddenly, the sound of a police siren echoed faintly through the tunnels. It was distant but real, like help had finally arrived. "Over here," she screamed, banging on the stone. But the siren didn't move closer. Instead, it looped endlessly, growing more distorted until it resembled a human scream. Then came the footsteps, heavy boots on wood. From the tunnel's far end, a silhouette of a police officer emerged, his flashlight beam cutting through the dust. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked. Relief washed over her. "Yes, please, help me get out." He approached slowly, and as the light hit his face, she realized something was terribly wrong. His features were faded, blurred, like a smudged photograph. When he spoke again, his mouth didn't move in sync. "We never left," he croaked, his eyes rolling back. The officer's body convulsed violently before collapsing to the floor. A badge rolled toward her boots. It was tarnished but legible. Deputy Carter. Somehow, Eleanor found herself standing in a new corridor, a narrow passage lined with filing cabinets rusted shut. On each drawer, faded police emblems were stamped beside the word "deceased." Her trembling hands pulled one drawer open. Inside were case files, soaked and moldy. But the names, they were all police officers. She flipped through a report dated August 1970. Investigation into Holy Mercy Baptist. 7 officers missing during site inspection, and below it was a blurry black and white photo of the church, exactly as she'd seen it tonight. Another file contained a cassette tape labeled Evidence Number 13. Against her better judgment, she inserted it into her phone's adapter and pressed play. The tape crackled. Then a man's voice spoke, strained and whispering. "Do not enter the church basement. It's not a place. It's a door." The recording cut off with a blood-curdling scream. Then, something metallic clattered behind her. When Eleanor turned, one of the filing cabinets had opened on its own. A single new file sat inside, freshly typed. The name on it, Eleanor Brooks, civilian reporter, missing 2022. The ground began to rumble. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the old foundation cracked apart. Eleanor clutched her phone and ran toward the sound of air, a faint draft coming from the far wall. She pushed on the stone and it shifted, revealing a narrow exit. She crawled through, emerging into a massive underground sanctuary she hadn't seen before. Dozens of stone pillars held up the crumbling ceiling. At the center stood an altar surrounded by rusted police badges, guns, and broken handcuffs, offerings to something unseen. Etched into the altar was a phrase, "Those who protect must remain." A cold wind swept through, carrying the echo of sirens and screams. The shadows twisted like living things, and from each corner, those same hollow-eyed officers began to step forward, their boots scraping the floor in unison. They raised their hands, pointing at her just as the preacher had. The last thing she heard before darkness swallowed everything was the choir resuming their song. That same haunting hymn, now deafening. 2 days later, a search team from the county sheriff's office found Eleanor's abandoned car on Route 19. The keys were still in the ignition, headlights on, battery dead. The ground nearby showed deep tire marks, as if the car had tried to reverse before stopping. When investigators entered the church ruins, they found no basement, no staircase, just cracked concrete. However, under one pew, they discovered Eleanor's phone. The footage was corrupt, save for one frame showing the underground altar and dozens of ghostly figures behind it. A report was filed, labeling her case Unresolved Disappearance Number 71. The officer who signed the report was Deputy Monroe. Though records show Monroe had been declared missing since 1970, months passed. Locals still avoided Route 19, claiming that on quiet nights, the faint sound of a church bell echoed from the woods, even though the bell tower had collapsed decades ago. Truckers spoke of seeing flashing red and blue lights near the old church grounds, but when they stopped, there were no vehicles in sight, only distant singing. The county eventually sealed off the road, citing safety hazards. But those who ventured close reported seeing a lone figure standing at the church gate, a woman holding a phone that never runs out of battery. No one knows if it's Eleanor, but one thing remains constant. The sign that once read, Holy Mercy Baptist, closed since 1968, now bears a new line, carved freshly into the wood. Welcome back, officer. It was 2:47 a.m., the quietest hour in Marion County, Oregon, when 911 dispatcher Megan Hayes received a call that would later become one of the department's most baffling and disturbing cases. The night was uneventful, just static on the radio and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Then the phone rang. 911, what's your emergency? She said, her tone calm and practiced. At first, only breathing, slow, uneven. Then a faint male voice. Help! Officer down. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Can you tell me your location? She asked, but the man continued mumbling. The words were fractured, like he was speaking through broken glass. He's still here. Don't let him find me. Megan immediately pinged the call and traced it to mile marker 54, an old logging road deep in the forest, where no patrol had been dispatched that night. The nearest unit, Deputy Cole, was sent to investigate. But before the line cut off, she heard something else on the other end. The sound of police radio chatter, faintly repeating her own words back to her in perfect sync. Deputy Cole Sanders reached mile marker 54 around 3:15 a.m. The fog was thick enough to swallow his high beams. The gravel road wound deep into pine forest, the air damp and silent. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm at the location. No visual on any officer or vehicle, he reported. Megan's voice came through softly. Copy that, Cole. Stay on the line. He stepped out of the cruiser, scanning with his flashlight. The beam cut through fog, revealing a single boot half buried in mud. Nearby, deep tire ruts led toward the tree line, then vanished. Cole crouched to inspect it. The boot was police issue. He radioed in again. Megan, I've got something. Possible officer gear, but before she could reply, a burst of static filled his earpiece, followed by a faint recording of his own voice from earlier. No visual on any officer or vehicle. His stomach dropped. He hadn't said that again. The radio repeated it, this time distorted, overlapping itself. The forest fell silent. Somewhere in the darkness, a two-way radio crackled, answering his transmission. From just a few yards away, Cole followed the faint glow of the static until he saw it. Another police cruiser. Headlights dim, parked sideways across the road as if abandoned in a hurry. The number on the side read Unit 7, a call sign retired 5 years earlier after the officer's death in the line of duty. He approached carefully, gun drawn. The driver's door hung open, rainwater pooling on the seat. The radio inside hissed, looping fragments of previous transmissions, including Megan's own voice saying, 911, what's your emergency? He leaned in and found an old dash cam still recording, though the car's power was long dead. On the passenger seat lay a folder soaked with moisture. Inside were photos of a previous investigation, forest homicides dating back to 1989. Victims, all law enforcement. Cole tried calling Megan again, but instead of her voice, the radio played something else, a deep, drawn-out whisper. Stay with the line. The headlights flickered once, then went dark, leaving only the sound of faint breathing over the radio. Cole sat inside the abandoned cruiser, reading the damp file by flashlight. The last page was a typed field report, dated June 12, 1997. It described a missing officer investigation after a call from the same location, mile marker 54. At the bottom, the report was signed by Deputy Cole Sanders. He froze. That was his name. Same signature, same badge number. But the report was over 25 years old. He radioed back to dispatch, his voice shaking. Megan, do you copy? Silence. Then faintly she replied, "Cole, who is this?" "What do you mean?" "It's me." "You're not on the schedule tonight," she said. Cole Sanders was found dead in the line of duty in 1997. The radio crackled violently, and before he could respond, the cruiser's dash cam turned on by itself, showing live footage of him sitting inside, staring at the screen. But in the reflection of the windshield, behind him, something moved in the fog. Cole turned sharply, gun drawn, but the fog swallowed everything. His flashlight beam caught only tree trunks glistening with dew. Then, footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the cruiser. He shouted, "Identify yourself!" But no one answered. He aimed toward the sound, his pulse racing. The fog thickened until even his car vanished from sight. Then a silhouette appeared, tall, wearing a police uniform, face hidden under a brimmed hat. The figure stood perfectly still, holding an old radio microphone to its mouth. Cole raised his weapon. "This is Deputy Sanders. Drop the radio." The figure didn't move. Instead, through the static, his own voice echoed back, "This is Deputy Sanders. Drop the radio." The figure took one step forward, and Cole realized it was him. Same uniform, same badge, same face pale and lifeless. The figure whispered, "You never left." The next moment, the radio screamed with overlapping voices. Dozens of officers all calling the same unit number, 777. The fog exploded in white light, and everything went silent. The radio in the cruiser crackled back to life. Megan's voice came through, weak, trembling. "Cole, if this is some kind of joke, stop it. I just saw your report appear in the system. Timestamped tonight." Cole grabbed the mic. "Megan, listen to me. Something's wrong out here. There's..." Static swallowed his words. Back in the dispatch center, Megan stared at her monitor in disbelief. A new file had indeed appeared. Incident number 2201, Deputy Cole Sanders. Status, pending recovery. The digital signature at the bottom was hers, yet she hadn't filed anything. Meanwhile, Cole stepped out of the car. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing faint outlines of dozens of police cruisers, all abandoned, some nearly consumed by moss. Radios inside them whispered the same overlapping distress calls, blending into a maddening chorus. Cole's flashlight began to flicker again. He turned it toward the tree line and saw multiple figures emerging, all in uniform, faces blurred and half-faded like corrupted video frames. Their radios echoed his own last words. "Something's wrong out here." Back at the station, Megan tried to trace the call again. But the system glitched, cycling endlessly through a frequency marked 7.7. Every attempt to disconnect only deepened the interference. Then, faintly, she heard something through her headset, her own voice whispering from the other side, "Stay with the line." Her pulse spiked. That phrase wasn't in the recording log. She looked up at the surveillance feed. The dispatch room security cameras showed her sitting still, but the timestamp was from 1997. The version of her on the screen was wearing an older uniform, headset on, face pale as she stared into nothing. Megan tore the headset off and called another dispatcher, but the phone rang once and went dead. Then, behind her, the radio console flicked on automatically. A male voice spoke softly. "This is Unit 7. We can't leave." The temperature dropped sharply. Every monitor displayed the same text in red. "Transmission repeat. Deputy Sanders." Cole wandered deeper into the woods, following the faint crackle of radio chatter. Each transmission was a warped version of real police calls, names of officers long dead, repeating the same desperate pleas. Eventually, he reached a clearing where an old radio tower stood, rusted and tilting. At its base were dozens of badges nailed into the metal, each belonging to a missing officer. A small generator hummed faintly beside it, even though no one had been there for years. The radio on his shoulder suddenly activated. "Cole Sanders, this is dispatch. Return to base immediately," but it wasn't Megan's voice. It was his own. He looked up. The red tower light blinked in rhythm with his heartbeat. The signal grew louder, repeating his voice again and again until the words distorted into a deep, inhuman tone. The forest air vibrated. He covered his ears, but through the noise, one phrase remained clear. "The call never ends." At 4:11 a.m., every police radio in Marion County began broadcasting a single looping message. Unit 7 responding. Mile marker 54. Officer down. Dispatchers across the county received the same call simultaneously. Each voice claimed to be Deputy Sanders. When Megan checked her board, the call log repeated infinitely, filling every active channel. Meanwhile, Cole stood beneath the tower, eyes glazed. His radio melted with static, the voice within begging him to stay connected. As he lifted his head, the tower lights flared, and one by one, all the ghostly officers appeared around him, standing in perfect silence, faces turned upward. A loud crack split the air. The tower surged with white light, and every transmission in the county went dead. When the backup team arrived hours later, the tower was cold. No Cole, no evidence. Only his badge fused into the metal base, number 77. The official report concluded that a radio malfunction caused a false distress signal. The department sealed off the forest and shut down the tower permanently. But a week later, during routine maintenance, a technician found a new transmission still looping on an encrypted channel. A woman's voice whispering faintly, "Megan, stay with the line." That night, Megan quit her job without notice. She told a colleague she couldn't bear to hear another emergency call again. But every now and then, dispatchers claim the 911 line rings once at 2:47 a.m., then cuts to silence. When they check the caller ID, it reads the same number every time, Unit 7. The forest had swallowed the path hours ago. Tom and Lisa, avid hikers and weekend adventurers, were trying to locate the old ranger trail that was marked clearly on their map. But every few minutes, the markings disappeared. Trees shifted, and the compass spun uselessly. Dusk was closing in fast, and fog crept through the thick pines like smoke from the underworld. The two decided to rest by a stream when Lisa spotted something unusual through the trees. A faint yellow light, flickering like a candle in the distance. "There's no cabin marked here," Tom said, checking his GPS, which showed only static and a red error bar. But as the fog cleared momentarily, the outline of a small wooden cabin became visible. A single chimney, a porch with a rocking chair, and smoke gently curling into the blackening sky. "Someone might live there," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling with both hope and unease. Neither of them noticed the animal bones scattered under the bushes near their feet, or the strange symbols carved into the bark of the nearby trees. By the time Tom and Lisa reached the cabin, night had fully descended. The front porch creaked beneath their boots. The wood felt damp, ancient, and rotten in some places. The front door was slightly open, revealing warm candlelight and shadows moving inside, as if someone was pacing. Lisa knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine tar, wet earth, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. There were no windows, only walls lined with strange carvings, spirals, triangles, and human eyes scratched into the timber. A fire burned in the hearth, but no one sat by it. On a dusty table in the center of the room lay an open journal. Its pages were yellowed and brittle. One entry stood out, written in uneven scrawl. "It keeps rebuilding itself every night. No matter how many times I burn it down," Tom frowned. What the hell does that mean? Then, from the hallway, came the unmistakable sound of a rocking chair creaking, slowly, steadily, as though someone invisible had just sat down. Tom turned toward the sound, his heart hammering. The creak, creak, creak echoed from the narrow hallway that led deeper into the cabin. Lisa gripped his arm tightly. "Maybe it's the wind," she whispered. But the air inside was still, heavy, suffocating. The fire flickered weakly, casting long shadows that moved like living things along the walls. Tom took a shaky step forward, holding up his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on the rocking chair. It was moving by itself, the old wood moaning with each sway. A knitted blanket lay across it, and on the seat was a doll. Its porcelain face was cracked, one glass eye missing. But what made Tom freeze was the fact that the doll was wearing a locket, the same one Lisa had around her neck. She touched hers instinctively, her breath catching. "Tom, how is that possible?" Before he could answer, the journal pages on the table flipped rapidly, as though caught in a gust of wind that came from nowhere. The candlelight dimmed to a dying orange glow, and the front door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire cabin. The sound of footsteps, bare, wet, dragging footsteps, echoed from upstairs. Tom whispered, "Someone's here with us." Tom gripped his flashlight tighter, every muscle in his body tense. Lisa didn't want to move, but the footsteps above them grew louder, slow, deliberate, circling directly over their heads. Then came a faint whisper, barely audible but chilling enough to freeze their blood. "Why did you come back?" Lisa's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" Tom nodded, his voice trembling. "Stay close." The staircase groaned under their weight as they climbed. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. At the top was a long hallway lined with doors. Only one was slightly open, with faint light leaking through the crack. Inside, a mirror stood against the far wall, covered in dust and cracks. Something in it moved, something that didn't match their reflection. Lisa gasped. "Tom, that's not us." The figures in the mirror stared back, versions of them, but pale, hollow-eyed, and grinning. Then the mirror began to ripple like water, distorting their reflections into grotesque shapes. Tom reached out to touch it, and the reflection's hand burst through the glass, grabbing his wrist. The scream that followed didn't sound human. Tom stumbled backward, clutching his wrist where the cold, unseen hand had gripped him. His skin burned, an icy imprint forming like a bruise. Lisa screamed, pulling him away from the shattered mirror. Shards scattered across the wooden floor, reflecting hundreds of distorted faces that weren't theirs. The whispering began again, dozens of voices this time, murmuring incoherently, overlapping, some weeping, some laughing. As they backed toward the hallway, the sound of scratching came from behind the wall. A hollow thump followed, then another, until a loose panel cracked open near the floor. Dust poured out. Tom crouched, shining his light into the dark gap. There was a small crawl space beyond, and something wrapped in rotted fabric. He hesitated before pulling it out. A police badge, rusted and bent, with a name barely visible. Deputy Mark Geller, 1987. Lisa covered her mouth. Tom, that's the officer who went missing here 30 years ago. Inside the same wrapping, they found a torn photograph. A man in uniform, standing with a family in front of the same cabin. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, "They won't let me leave." The walls around them seemed to close in, the whispering now sounding like the word "stay," repeated over and over. The air grew colder. Somewhere deep below the cabin, something heavy dragged across the floor. The dragging sound grew louder, rhythmic, like chains scraping against stone. Lisa pointed toward the floorboards. A faint light flickered from below. They hadn't noticed a basement door before, but now it was visible under an old rug near the table. The iron latch was rusted, the wood swollen from years of moisture. Tom knelt and pulled it open. A cold wave of air rushed up, carrying the stench of decay. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. "We have to see what's down there," Tom said. Lisa shook her head violently. "No, we need to leave now," but the front door had somehow vanished. Where the door once stood was now a solid wall of wood, as if it had never existed. Panic clawed at them. They were trapped. Tom turned back toward the basement. The sound stopped. Then softly came a voice, a man's voice. "Help me." It was faint, pleading. Against all reason, Tom started down the stairs, his flashlight trembling. The steps creaked and bent under his weight. The beam caught glimpses of old tools, rusted chains, and something dark smeared on the walls. Lisa called from above, "Tom, what do you see?" He didn't answer. His light flickered, then went out. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came Tom's voice, echoing weakly. "Lisa, he's down here." Lisa hesitated at the top of the stairs, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. "Tom," she whispered again. But the darkness below didn't answer. She could still hear faint breathing, slow, labored, like someone struggling. Against every instinct, she began to descend, one trembling step at a time. The beam from her flashlight flickered weakly, revealing a damp stone basement. Old filing cabinets stood against the wall, rusted shut, and the remains of a wooden chair lay broken in the corner. Then the light caught movement. A man stood in the far end of the room, back turned, wearing a torn police uniform. His shoulders were slumped, his breathing ragged. "Sir?" Lisa whispered. "Are you Deputy Geller?" The man didn't move. She stepped closer, and her foot splashed into a shallow puddle. When she raised her light again, the man had vanished. In his place was Tom, standing perfectly still, his eyes wide, face pale as ash. "Lisa," he said in a hollow voice. "He's here." Before she could react, the light dimmed again, and behind Tom, the figure appeared once more. The badge on his chest gleamed through the dark. In his face was nothing but shadow and teeth. The air temperature dropped sharply, her breath turning to mist. Then everything went black. Lisa woke up lying on the cold floor, her head throbbing. The basement was quiet again, the air stale. Tom was gone. Her flashlight flickered weakly beside her. She forced herself up, scanning the room. The cabinets she'd seen earlier were now open, and inside one lay a leather-bound journal, the cover water-stained and fragile. She flipped through it with shaking hands. The entries were all written by Deputy Geller himself. The last page stopped her breath cold. "I've seen their faces in the mirror. I can't tell what's real anymore. The cabin keeps them here. It feeds on us. If anyone finds this, don't stay after dark." As she read those words, the basement lights flickered, faint, almost electrical, though there was no power. The sound of creaking wood came again, followed by the familiar voice whispering from nowhere. "Why did you come back?" Lisa dropped the book and ran for the stairs. But as she reached the top, the hatch slammed shut above her. The whispering turned into screams, dozens of them, male and female, overlapping, rising into a horrifying crescendo. Then silence. 3 weeks later, a missing persons report brought local police back to the old cabin. The same structure that had once belonged to Deputy Geller was now slated for demolition. Officers who entered described an impossible chill inside, as though the temperature dropped 20 degrees below the forest air. They found 2 sets of belongings: Tom and Lisa's backpacks, flashlights, and phones. The footage recovered from Lisa's phone showed only brief clips: a rocking chair moving by itself, the mirror breaking, and a male voice whispering, "Help me." The final clip ended abruptly as the screen went black. Forensics uncovered Geller's old badge and the journal near a collapsed section of the basement wall. Behind it, they discovered what looked like a hidden chamber. Inside were human remains, at least 3 skeletons, one still wearing the remnants of a police uniform. DNA confirmed one of them was indeed Deputy Mark Geller. No trace of Tom or Lisa was ever found. The basement door, investigators noted, had been sealed from the inside. Months after the case was closed, the cabin was finally demolished. Yet the demolition crew reported strange occurrences: cold spots, tools vanishing overnight, and most disturbingly, a mirror that appeared in the debris pile, though none had been documented inside. Workers claimed they saw figures behind their reflections, staring back with pale faces in dark uniforms. The recovered mirror was later stored in an evidence locker in Richmond County. Within a week, the lights in that facility began flickering at night. Motion sensors triggered when no one was present, and 2 officers reported hearing faint whispers near the storage unit. One officer, reviewing surveillance footage, swore he saw something move in the reflection behind him. He resigned the next day. The case of Tom, Lisa, and Deputy Geller remains open, officially classified as an unexplained disappearance. The cabin's location has since been fenced off by local authorities, though hikers still report seeing a faint light deep in the woods at night, followed by the sound of a rocking chair creaking in the dark. Some things, it seems, never rest. Some disappearances cannot be explained by bad weather or bad luck. When the uniform falls silent, when the radio goes dead, and when the badge is found but the officer is not, we're left with questions that no report can answer. Tonight's accounts remind us that even those sworn to protect us sometimes step into places where protection no longer exists. From the haunted backroads of Virginia to the forgotten stations of the Midwest, these cases reveal something deeper, a darkness that hides behind the badge itself. Perhaps some investigations were never meant to be closed. Perhaps the shadows that claim them are not born of this world, but of the memories left behind. Because evil doesn't always strike the innocent. Sometimes it finds those who chase it. If these stories unsettled you, share your thoughts or personal encounters in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Dark Fears for more investigations into the unknown. True accounts that crawl beneath the surface of reality and linger long after the lights go out. Until next time, keep your lights on and your eyes open.